and welcome to another episode of the Tell Not Show. As always, we are your hosts. We have the wonderful Kirsha Fox, author of newly released Son of Deception, homeschooling mom of four, and avid gamer.
All right. And my co-host is Julia J.K. Allen. She's an author, editor, and author coach. She loves to write horror and fantasy, and she loves to sprinkle magic on everything. Thank you so much for joining us today.
We're so excited to welcome our guest. JMD Reid has been a longtime fan of fantasy ever since he read The Hobbit way back in fourth grade. His head has always been filled with fantastical ideas, and he is eager to share the world dwelling in his dreams with you. Reid is a longtime resident of the Pacific Northwest, and in and around the city of Tacoma, the rainy, gloomy atmosphere of Western Washington, combined with the natural beauty of the evergreen forest and the looming Mount Rainier, provides the perfect climate to brew creative worlds and exciting stories. When he's not writing, you can find him playing video games, D&D, and listening to amazing music. So welcome.
Hello.
Thanks so much for being on the show tonight.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're super pumped to have you. So, obviously, you live in one of the beautiful places of the United States, and that leads, like you were saying, to many wonderful worlds being created. I'm sure it just does wonders for your creativity.
Yeah, no, it's very beautiful up here. They got the Mount Rainier just out my window. You can see it if it's not a cloudy day. I'm pretty close to it. It's very beautiful. It just looms over the entire region. You can see it. Almost from everywhere, from like Olympia to Seattle.
Oh, that's so nice. So tell us a little bit about how you got started on writing. So it was a little bit after reading The Hobbit, but give us some details on your writing.
So I read The Hobbit back in the fourth grade, which was, might have been 90, 89, right around then, 91, I don't know. It's hard to remember. But I got really hooked on fantasy, and so I wanted to started write my own stuff. That started in junior high, so I think 7th, 8th grade. I started just writing stuff, like video game scripts. So I started playing Japanese RPGs, like Final Fantasy 3 and Secret of Mana and stuff like that. And so I started turning Final Fantasy 3 into a novel, just sort of writing it. I guess not quite fan fiction, because I wasn't trying to write my own story. I was really just trying to turn the video game into a novel, is what I was starting out. Then I had ADD, so I just got bored with that, and I started writing other things. And all through my junior high and high school, all it was just writing something and then getting a new idea, writing that, and then get a chapter, then write something else. And I couldn't stay on any topic. And I graduated from high school, and then I just started working.
Right.
Suddenly, WoW came out, so World of Warcraft came out when I was 22, and so that sucked up a lot of free time. But I always wanted to write. I always wanted to be a fantasy novelist, and so I got to 30, and I got diagnosed with hypertension, which is very rare for someone who's 30. It's usually someone older, so I apparently have some genetic predisposition to high blood pressure. And so it made me go wow, I'm 30 and I have to take medication for the rest of my life. And I'm not gonna live forever. So it really got me starting to want to write and try to prioritize it and make it. And I still found that really hard. It was really hard to sit down and write for more than 5 minutes. But yeah, no, I kept at it for kind of 2 years until I finally really got into the habit of writing an hour a day. And I worked on my first novel, Above the Storm, which got published about 7 years later, which is about 3 or 4 years ago now.
Well, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it is quite an accomplishment to finish a book. We both also in the ADHD camp, so we understand that struggle. I think that it is especially hard building habits. And so I love to hear that you've worked so diligently to prioritize writing and build that habit.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't come naturally, that's for sure.
It's not as easy as you think it is. You don't just sit around and just it magically happens. You got to sit around and write, and you have to think, and you have to not get distracted by everything. you know.
Right. It's so intentional, the focus that you have to dedicate. Yeah, because you're striving against like ocean
Yeah,
waves coming and you're trying to walk forward against it.
yeah,
Yeah.
you have to make it a priority.
Hmm.
You have to sacrifice other things in your life to make time for it, you know.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Well, congratulations again on finishing the novel and getting it published because that is quite an accomplishment. I also have a special place in my heart for the fantasy genre. I read my first fantasy novel and it just kind of was like mind opening for me. So I have can relate to
How
you
many
falling in
novels
love.
have you completed by now, including the ones that you've co-written?
Oh, that's a lot. I'm over 30 now.
Yeah.
Oh
So
wow, that is quite an accomplishment. Yeah.
I have 22 novels
Mhm.
published
Wow.
by just myself, and I honestly don't know what I'm up to with Michael Evan. I think we're
Mhm.
up to
Right,
12 or
right.
13. I'm writing one right now for him,
Mhm.
but they're short. They're like 20K
Okay.
um,
Are
for
fairly
me. So those ones are like where the fantasy novels tend to be between 90 and 100 and
Yeah, yeah.
10K. Other than
Mhm.
my first series, which I went epic fantasy with like 130K is the short first book, and the final book is 270K, which was too big for me to bind on Amazon. I had to shrink the
Mhm.
font size to get them to
Oh
do the
yeah.
print version. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it was too big.
Mhm.
Yeah, printers they get picky about word size when you get on the
Yeah.
larger end.
So
So yeah, that's amazing though. That's a lot of books that you've written. What does your writing process look like?
well, I started off very much like a pantser. I
Hmm.
would just sit down and I kind of had like I had a very rough outline of my first novel, which turned into two novels because it was way too much story.
Right.
Um, but then as I've grown on, I found that I really like to do like I'll do a book outline
Hmm.
for the book, which is very much I want these plot points, I want these characters to do this. It's very like it's like bullet points, right? This happens,
Right.
this happens, this happens. And then I like to write really detailed scene outlines now for 4 or 5 chapters, usually up until like the next major thing happens.
Hmm.
And then I write it, and then I can think of okay, now what's the reaction to that, and then build up to the next action scene,
Right.
whether it's actual action scene or it's emotional action or it's
Absolutely.
whatever conflict is kind of being explored. And then I don't know. I find that helps me. I don't know. I don't know. It keeps me characters. I guess my characters
Right.
being realistic. I don't know. So I'm thinking like, how did they react to that? How are they going to process this? And then I can adjust my book outline maybe if I need to,
Mhm.
um,
No,
stuff like that.
yeah, totally can understand that. I feel that a lot of people, when they are confused about like what to do next for their plot, a great question to ask is like, what are your characters' motivations? What would your characters do in this situation? And you can really figure out a lot of what's going on by focusing through your characters, the way you were talking about.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, it's always I don't know. I always think about the characters come first, I guess,
Yeah,
for the story.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of your strengths you said when we talked before the show was world building. Why is world building so important to get right?
World building is what makes the like you need suspension of disbelief, and that comes from your world building.
Hmm.
And so when you're writing a story that takes place, in like modern times, it's really easy. You get to rely on like your readers' intuitive knowledge of how the world works. And
Right.
so as long as you're not doing anything that's really like contradicted to that, then it's really easy. But when you're writing like a fantasy world where you're making up everything, you have to know like your history, your cultures, your religions. You have to
Hmm.
figure all that out, and
Mhm.
you need to have all that groundwork so you can make the world feel like it exists beyond the side of the characters, so it can feel lived in, so it can feel authentic. So
Right. Right.
yeah.
Yes, we've talked with other fantasy writers before about the careful balance we have with world building, where if you include too much detail, too much, it gets dense and heavy and bulky and boring.
Hmm.
But if you
Yeah.
include too little, it becomes flimsy and unbelievable. So
Right.
it's kind of
Yeah,
fun to find that middle ground.
it's definitely hard. I know my first prologue from my first book, I rewrote that like 8, 9 times because it really was just plot exposition, the prologue. Like
Right.
it was just
Right.
or I'm not even plot exposition. It was it's history, the prologue. Here's the history of everything, and it's so much
Right.
detail, and I cut all of it, and
Mhm.
most of that detail, which is like the backstory to the central conflict between the two goddesses, most of that detail never even made it into any of the 5 books. It was
Right.
there, and I could pull on it.
So we're talking about balance. What are some other pitfalls with world building that authors tend to fall into? What should they
You
avoid?
can spend all your time building your world and then never write a single word.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pitfall. So that's the other thing I learned off my first series. So I spent a lot of time putting up really detailed histories of stuff, and then none of it made it into the book. Not a
Right.
hardly any bits. The occasional reference. And so what I learned was that I need to be deep in places, and then shallow in places that I just want to have out there. So like I could drop names and places where trade comes from and where certain cultures were, but I didn't need to have them to be really well detailed if the story never actually goes there. And if the story does end up going there, then I can dig in deeper and use like the skeleton I made for their cultures matter. Or if there's a character from there, right, I can expand on their culture a bit more. So like I have the very shallow stuff. I have like very basic information on the entire world. And then I have really more detailed information on very specific cultures and places in the world that are going to be important. And then other places just might even just be evocative names on the maps. I like putting like evocative names on the map and just like, why is this weird place called this? Just have my readers wonder about it, and maybe we'll never even go there, but I don't know. They're just like, there's a story why this place is called that. And,
right.
And it just helps with that the world exists for more than just telling this one story.
Right. Having that depth in your head allows you to put depth in the story and on the page. Absolutely. Yeah. So you talked about rewriting your prologue so many times, but what tips and what did you do to work on getting the world building in without too much info dumping?
I mean, I just once when I realized that was what I was doing, I was like, okay, I have to pare this down. And then it really was. I was just trying to give like the bare minimum to make it make sense. So, I mean, the Storm Below, it's a very alien world. Like we have floating islands. There's like flying fish. There's there's non-human races, and there's a whole magical technology system. So there's a lot of stuff that you need to get that in. It's just trying to work in places to do it organically. So to explain the magic system, like everyone gets like a blessing and gets some part of the magic system when they turn of age. And so that's where the story starts with our characters. They're going off for their like coming of age ceremony. So it's a good way to like kind of introduce all of it while under the guise of the sort of system, and then throw in some of the initial like conflict that there's something off about our main character. There's something didn't go right in his blessing.
Right.
That has ramifications that's going to ripple through the entire series. And it all dates back to like the very first chapter when something, in his opening chapter where something unusual happened to him. And this mystery. So that's, it's just looking for things like that. Like when to explain things, not to front load it, but like as I needed to, or, as the characters had to travel to this place, it let me just introduce a concept like, hey, there's like fish floating around. That's just very normal, just to pepper in the scene with like the character of the world and how it kind of works just by, describing that.
Yeah, no, I love little clues like that. Like the 1984 starts with the clock striking 13, and so it gives you a clue that it's a world similar to ours where we have clocks and we tell the time, but obviously it's different because there's 13 on the clock instead of 12, right? Yeah, little clues like that make for really interesting juxtapositions between like our world and then the story world. So love that. What is your favorite part of writing?
I think my favorite part is getting the story out of my head and putting it down on paper. Well, on digital bytes on a word processor,
Mm-hmm.
And so just getting it out of my head and and making it concrete, taking all these myriad of possibilities, because that's what storytelling is. You have
Right.
like unlimited possibilities, and you're like narrowing it down. You're like discovering which way the story should go, and which you're closing off some paths, opening new paths, and it's fun seeing where a story will go. I write series, but I tend not to have a good idea of where the series is going to go
Mm-hmm.
and end. So I write them book by book and see how they progress. I weirdly kind of have a good feeling on how long it'll be, like how many
Yeah.
books, but weirdly, but I rarely know real good details. I only ever had one where I had a really good outline for the entire series going before I started writing. But usually it's more I
Yeah.
just see how it though see how conflict and characters and events develop and then build upon that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So that's your favorite part of writing. What's your least favorite part of writing?
It's called editing. It's it's I hate doing editing. Um, I hate that. I'm not good at it. The ADD really is a problem on going
Mm-hmm.
through my manuscript before I send it off to my editor.
Right. Right.
And then it's just tedious going through all their corrections
Yeah.
once I get back. So yeah, that's the worst part.
Oh, yeah. I can understand that. I'm an editor, but I can feel you on. I know a lot of people don't love that part of writing.
Yeah, I think it's a very specific person that can like really just read every single word. Like I have a
Right.
very hard time. I have a hard time reading like that where I can
Mm.
read every single word. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I think that I can relate because like to me, I like making graphics and stuff, but if I had to go like pixel by pixel, that's where it gets really tedious for
yeah,
me, and I'm just like can't do that. But yeah, I can relate to the tedium part. So you have been writing for a while now. Such an accomplishment to have so many books under your belt. Do you have writing advice that you would like to share with other people, like that you think is really, really helpful?
I think this the best advice is to if you want to do it and like publish books and have a chance of being successful, you got to treat it like a job and set
Mm.
a schedule and stick to it and try to. I mean, sometimes you can't,
Right.
but I try to have a schedule. Like this is when I'm going to write and write at that time every day, um, except for Mondays. Mondays is like my day off from most of my writing, but the other
Right.
6 days of the week, yeah,
Yeah.
I try to.
Yeah, it's good to have a rest day or a cheat day when you're doing anything strict, right?
Mhm. So you play D&D, you read Tolkien and everything. What do you feel influences your writing the most of your?
Um, Most of my writing is influenced probably by my style is influenced by Robert Jordan.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Uh, Definitely my style. I got really into Robert Jordan not long, so like I did Hobbit in the fourth grade. I did Lord of the Rings. I didn't really do Lord of the Rings until the sixth grade, so it was a little
Mm-hmm.
tough for fourth grade me. And then that led into like David Eddings and Terry Brooks, and then in my first year of junior high, I read Robert Jordan, The Wheel of Time, and that changed me. I was obsessed with that series for
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so that was what 93. I started reading that, and I didn't finish until 10 years ago. So
Yeah.
I was on
Right.
like the fan forums. I was reading theories. I was
Right.
very deep into the Wheel of Time. So style really just like left off on me as far as like really close POVs, really limited third person POV,
Mm-hmm.
which I hadn't really read because Tolkien doesn't write limited third person
Mm.
POV,
Right.
and neither
Right.
does Eddings or Brooks, but Jordan did. It was right when
Mm-hmm.
that transitioned from when we saw like the third person omniscient in fantasy went more towards
Right.
third person limited was right around in the 90s, and so it really influenced me. That's how I write all my books. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but as far as like more, I don't know. I kind of want to write like really great action scenes like Sanderson does. And I kind of want to write characters that are as complicated as R. Scott Bakker, but I don't come anywhere close to him. And
I'm sure you're being modest. Yeah.
no, I really am not. He's got like a PhD in he's a PhD in philosophy, and he does neuroscience, and he writes papers on neuroscience and behavior.
So he's got a good grasp of
yeah. So he writes really complicated characters.
You have something to aspire to, then.
Yeah, it definitely.
That's really nice.
Yeah, no, like I want to write twists. I don't know. I read Sanderson stuff. I was like, oh, I wish I would write something as good as this. Or I read Stephen Erickson's Malazan is another really series I like, and his world is just bananas.
Yeah. I know when I think of my idols in writing, I'm just like, I will never come close to their shadows. But yeah, they are the greats for a reason, for sure. And we just keep aspiring to try to be half as good. And then,
yeah.
So those are some things that influence your writing. Where do you find inspiration for your ideas?
Just everywhere. You never know when something's going to inspire you. A song, a TV show, a book, just like, hey, that's cool, but what if this was how it was? Things just pop into your head. And if you have the time to develop them, that's serendipitous, but a lot of times you're like, that's great. Same, I'm writing this 7-book fantasy series right now, and I don't have time to develop it, and maybe I won't remember this idea in a year.
Right.
Sometimes sometimes the idea just stays in the back of your mind and rattles around there until you just finally say, okay, now is the time to develop it.
Right. A lot of writers struggle with more ideas than time situation. So it's very relatable. I think that a lot of people can find inspiration in media as well, and asking that big what if question, like, oh, I like this story, but what if this happened instead?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Great way to spark ideas.
Sometimes it's like, if it were me, I would have done it this way.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's one reason that people write is like, I want to write stories my way. They're never quite how I like them. They're never no story is perfect. No, of course, your stuff is never going to be perfect either.
But it's perfect for you. Yeah.
That's another thing to authors. It's never going to be perfect. You're always going to have something you don't like about it, and that's just life. We don't live in a platonic ideal world. We live in a world where everything is busted, and so it's okay if your story is not perfect. Just get it as good as you can.
Yeah.
And don't stress if it's not quite perfect.
I love that advice. It's true. I mean, they're called rough drafts for a reason, especially like.
Don't stress over your rough draft. Don't edit it until you're done writing your entire novel.
Right.
Just it's fine if it's garbage. You can fix garbage. I think there's a quote. I don't remember who said it, but you can fix anything but a blank page. So that's all.
Stephen King.
Very true.
I don't remember who said it. Maybe King. I don't know. It was some author that had some good advice there. But it's a good quote, though. If you don't write something, you can't fix it.
Yes,
absolutely. It is very good advice. I always love the advice that like good writing is rewriting, anyways, right? So, it's often the first draft. We're telling ourselves the story and figuring everything out, and then we rewrite it to make sure it seems like we knew what we were doing the whole time.
Yeah, I think Hemingway said like the first draft of everything is garbage.
Yeah. So. Right. Yeah. So do you ever struggle with writer's block? And if you do, how do you kind of combat that?
I've never had writer's block.
What's the secret?
I don't know. I've certainly had to stop and think about how a story will develop, and like sit down and just think, maybe pace, and just fish through ideas. But I've never just not had nothing. And so I'm not quite sure. I do work on quite a number of projects. I ghostwrite for a living. So I'm always working on something on the side anyways. So I don't know, maybe that helps. So I'm not just locked in. I also don't stress. So maybe there's like, I'm not stressed over it. I set my own, like, I write. I don't have like a publisher with deadlines, so maybe that kind of helps. I guess I don't know. My ghostwriting, I don't know. That's different. That's like they usually give me an outline. I just you know
Have to
transcribe it.
solidify it.
Yeah, but yeah, with my own stuff. I don't know. There's no pressure on me if I don't come up with something. I guess so. I
Right.
don't. There's no stress. So I'm just thinking about what comes next.
You just have
So
the
maybe that's it.
freedom to
Yeah,
be creative. Yeah, that's
yeah,
nice. I think that, yeah, I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, and that can kind of lead to some writer's block. So being a
yeah,
little stress free is a nice approach.
yeah,
I also like that you talk about like pacing, doing something like getting some movement, getting
yeah.
the blood
Pace.
flowing, but
Go for a drive. Take a shower. Do something
right,
that occupies a part of your body, and
right.
helps it helps your mind. And there's weird ways like how your mind works. Like your mind is being active in something in two things. And so I don't know. It can work with your mind. I don't know. It helps. I
Yeah,
find
absolutely.
there's something about it, like this part of your body that just automatically can make you walk around, can just take
Right.
over and free you just for focusing on something.
Absolutely.
It's
Or
like
just being
driving.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you've ever driven somewhere and realized you don't remember how you drove there.
Mm-hmm.
I used
Right.
to I used to deliver pizzas for a living, and I would do that. I
Yeah.
would suddenly realize I was like back at the store.
That, and you do the action, and then you're like, wait, I didn't really think about that hard enough. Like I just
Yeah.
did
Yeah. It's just
that.
a different part of your brain takes over that can handle
Yeah.
repetitive behavior.
And then it
That's so
doesn't record it for you to look at later.
No, because it wasn't
right.
important.
Memory's gone.
Yeah,
Right.
because it
Right.
wasn't important. Your brain was like, you were thinking about this, and your body was just, going off of habit.
Right.
You don't need to
Right.
remember that because you do it all the time. Yeah.
Right. What has been your most significant writing victory so far?
It was writing my first novel. That
Mm,
was something just amazing. Because,
yeah.
like I said, I started 30, 40, 50, 60 different stories. But then, and it was always my great fear that I never would be able to complete one because I would
Mm,
get distracted. So writing, 130,000 words on a single story without getting distracted, yeah, it proved I could do it. Like I was like, okay,
absolutely.
I can do this now. I'm old enough now. Maybe I just need to get out of my 20s and mellow out of it.
Right. Right.
Get a little older. But like whatever, it worked. I was able to. I did it, and that was it.
Yeah.
It was great.
I don't know about you guys. My 20s were a wild time. Like it's just a roller coaster of emotions, and yeah, your 30s and are much more mellow.
Yeah,
And
I don't know. My 20s were just like playing video games and hanging out with friends and working terrible jobs because I dropped out of college and
right,
because I'd rather just play video games and hang out with my friends. And like I
right,
had to work to pay bills. No, so
right.
it wasn't like anything. Yeah, so I don't know. It was a very it was a wasted decade in retrospect. But oh well.
Well, it taught you. I'm sure it taught you things about yourself.
Yeah,
Like you knew
yeah,
what you wanted, and you did what you wanted. So there's
yeah.
some value in that.
And I did some dumb stuff.
Hmm.
Drove to Vegas straight with my friends. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, that was a 20-hour drive. We didn't.
yeah,
We
but I'm
stopped
sure it
only
was.
for gas and food.
Yeah, I'm sure it was quite an experience though. So you got to live out some of your
It was. We
bucket list.
almost
I'm sure.
we
Yeah.
almost ran out of gas in the middle of the California mountains at 2 in the morning.
Oh my
We're
god.
coming. We're coming down
On
in.
the grapevine?
No, so this would have been coming down into Susanville in the Sierra
Mm.
Nevadas.
Oh,
So that's on the so Susanville is right on the Nevada
okay.
California border, right by
Yes.
Reno. But
Mhm.
like we had left North
My,
Bend in
my mind is
Oregon.
still in Vegas. So I was like,
Yeah,
are
yeah,
you?
we had left like North Bend, and that's when we topped off, and that was like hours ago. I don't even think maybe we didn't even top off. That might have been our mistake. We're like, we can get to
Right.
Susanville, and then like we're like the fuel lights on as we're winding down these mountain roads, driving way too
Right.
fast because we're afraid like we're gonna run out of gas. And
Right.
this was 2004. None of us had a cell phone.
Right.
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 So we were like, if we ran out of gas, we were really, really boned. And then we hit like the highway, and we're like, We don't know which way to go, right or left. We hit Susanville. It's dark.
Right.
And so we like, let's go right. And then we go right and we found this closed gas station, but they still had the pumps on and you could pay with credit cards. And we're like, okay,
Yeah.
we got gas. And then we went left because we had to go left to get to Reno. And we come around this corner and then there's all these like gas stations that are open and food restaurants.
Right.
And we're like,
right.
well, good thing we found that closed gas station.
Right. Oh my god.
We went the wrong way.
Adventure. Yeah. That's so amazing.
And my friend slept through the entire thing in the back seat. I had no idea we almost got stranded in the mountains.
Right. I think it's wild when I think back to like the time before everyone had cell phones. Like I didn't get a cell phone until I was 18, and it was just like, yeah, I really was out there driving for like 2 years of my life, just like depending on serendipity.
I went through high school,
Yes.
Driving around with my friends and stuff, and none of us had cell phones. It was like, I graduated in '99.
Absolutely,
no one had cell phones.
Now you almost need your phone to go driving like you need your keys. Like, why would you leave without your phone? That seems irresponsible.
Map questing before you left, and then you got a bad navigator. Like if the person riding shotgun was like told you too late to turn, and then you're just like, now what do we do? Like, it was a lawless time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I drove for a living for 13 years. Like I delivered. So like it wasn't just delivering pizzas. Also drove like a paratransit shuttle, and that took me all over Pierce County. And that was also before we had had to use a map book.
Right.
It was like we weren't allowed to have our phones with us if we had a cell phone, because this was this was like 2010 when I started that job.
Right.
And so smartphones were just kind of coming out, but like we weren't supposed to have our phones on us. And so we had a map book, like a thick book that had a very detailed map of 3 counties of Washington State that we had to flip through to find where we were.
It's a lost art. Yeah. Navigation really is. Yeah.
By the time I stopped that job, they were giving the new drivers GPSs because they no longer made map books. So like that transition from having maps to not having maps happened in that 4 years I worked at that job.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Technology and what becomes outdated is so fast to change over these days. For sure.
At least in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
Right. So you've mentioned a couple of books that you've loved, but do you have like a favorite, and like why is that your favorite in particular, either author or book?
So my favorite book is Lord of Chaos by Robert Jordan. That is the 6th book of the series. And I don't know, it just has everything worked in the book. All the character stuff worked, the action worked, there's like some really just like breathtaking suspense. Like the main character gets kidnapped by his enemies, and like the other characters trying to save him. It's this like reckless race against time, and it in retrospect it also started the main character on the second half of the character arc, where he's dealing with like the PTSD of what happened to him on this one.
Right.
And I will say, like, I've never read a fantasy series where like the main character, I was scared of him by near the end of the series because his PTSD had gotten so bad that he was just losing, like he was putting so much pressure on himself that he was just losing it. And it was very, Robert Jordan was like a Vietnam vet. And so he put a lot of that into it. He talks about like how he was like in Vietnam and he got really cold. He could like eat food next to dead NVAs and it wouldn't bother him. And then he looks at this picture of him and he's like, I don't even know that guy, like who I had to be to survive this. And so, I don't know. So, yeah. So
I do really appreciate when authors put real life things like mental health conditions into their writing, because it's like, yes, this is something that if you went through this event, you would have a trauma response, or you would have PTSD, or something. So you would have to process it in some way. And I feel like that was like maybe a fallacy of older writing, is that they didn't go through and have them have these very human reactions, right, to what was going on around them. And so I really appreciate novels that do.
Yeah, there's definitely more. You get into the more like adventurous stuff. And it's like that, none of that stuff ever seems to bother them. But like, you get into like the more serious stuff, like even Lord of the Rings like deals with PTSD. Like when you get to the end of that series and like you can see how like the hobbits, they don't feel like they belong.
Frodo's never the same.
He's never the same. Like that's really his whole journey is like he never he never came back. Like he never
Mhm.
recovered.
Right. Yeah, he goes
That's
on
his,
to the next,
yeah, because that's his whole story. Like he
Undying
just,
Lands. Yeah.
it was just too much for him. And that goes back to like Tolkien. He went to war with 4 of his buddies, and in
Yeah.
World War I, he was the only one that came back.
Yeah. I watched All Quiet on the Western Front, and that was a
Oh, the new
very
Netflix one.
yeah.
I heard that's
It's
good.
intense.
Yeah.
It is. It's very intense. And yeah, I mean, when people go through these things that are very, you can't help but be changed, right, by your circumstances and what you survive and what you've been through and all of that. And so it really adds like a gritty realness to novels to include that, for sure.
Yeah, I try to include some of that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's JMD Reid.
Right.
To experience those things without necessarily having to experience those things.
Yeah, I just don't know. I watch a lot of war movies, I guess.
Yeah.
But a lot of history. And
right.
Try to put that stuff in.
Yeah, history is so fascinating, and a lot of drama and stuff happens during wars, and so you can really learn a lot from watching those things. We talked a little bit earlier about writing advice that you like. Do you have any writing advice that you hate?
Yeah, don't write in passive voice.
Okay.
It's not an absolute.
Right.
Passive voice has its purpose, and if you know how to
Right.
use passive voice, it can be effective. The advice should be, watch your passive voice. Make sure it shouldn't be in an active voice. Look out for it. But to say never, that's the thing. You should never say like, no writing rule should be an absolute. Like,
Absolutely agree.
Like, Stephen King's like, never use adverbs, but sometimes you have to use an adverb.
Right.
But you shouldn't overuse the adverb. You shouldn't have an adverb at the end of every, verb. You should be like, if I have an adverb at the end of this verb, is there a different verb in English I can use that means the same thing, right? And then use that.
Absolutely,
so stuff like that.
Yes.
I would agree.
Your language where you can, definitely. But yes, there is a use for passive voice and for adverbs, for sure.
Right. I mean, it's a style. There's, each writer's voice is unique. So some people employ a little bit more passive voice than other people. And it's definitely if it's a stylistic choice,
right.
Absolutely, there's a place for it.
What it should be done is done with purpose and understanding of how you're using your craft.
Right.
And that's something that you can only develop by developing your voice, which is just you write a lot and then you start to figure out how you like to write. And you get feedback from people who are like, hey, don't do this. Like my editor's always like, I've discovered a new verb you overuse in this manuscript. I'm like, okay, well, we'll cut that one out, but I'm sure I'll find some new verb that I'm going to overuse. It's a problem of mine. I'd be like, okay, you use this verb like too many times.
Right.
In this manuscript, it annoyed me. Like, okay.
Yeah. One thing I always hate about passive voice is when people like misunderstand it and they're just like, oh, get rid of all the was in your book. And I'm like, well, what if he was running? You know what I mean? That's not passive voice. There's like a literal tense,
That changes it from, from past to past perfect tense, right?
Right.
Yeah. And that, if you're writing in past tense, you need to use past perfect tense to like shove things even further back into the past.
Yeah.
If you're writing in present tense, you probably aren't going to be using a lot of wases and hads and stuff.
Right.
But if you're writing in past tense, you're going to have to, just because how else are you explaining something that happened before if you're not switching into a different verb tense?
That was a pet peeve of mine, because I was just like, okay, you're not only like taking this advice to never use it, but you're misunderstanding
right.
it. And I'm just like, no, was is not a dirty word. So yeah. Glad that other people understand my pet peeve. That always drove me crazy.
No, I had an author friend who told me that, and I was like, listen. And I was like, this. She didn't, she's just high school educated. No, I'm knocking her. That's the same for me. I was like this is, and I was like, these are the tenses of English. It's been 20 years since you graduated. I kind of forgot a lot of that stuff too. And but so this is how it works. She's like, oh, okay, I get it now. It's like, yeah, someone told you that bad advice, and
Right.
she took it to heart, sadly. But now,
Yes, 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 yeah. Yeah. That's why we love to ask this question is like what writing advice do you hate? Because it is so interesting to hear what people have been told and led
there's
astray with.
there's so much. It's like
Right.
everything. There's good, there's good noise, bad noise, and
Mm-hmm.
you just gotta
For
filter
sure.
through it.
I love how almost every single author that we have asked that question of, they'll say what writing advice they don't like, but they always follow up with, there are no absolutes. There are no
Right.
absolute rules. Every
Right.
single one almost.
There's another quote I like. It's like someone wrote down all the rules to writing, but no one can remember what they are.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's the perfect way of putting it. There's an exact way to write well, but nobody knows it. Yeah. Um, so we do want to give you the opportunity to tell our audience where they can find you online. If you want to talk about any new releases you have, this is the perfect chance.
All right. Well, I am. You can find me best on Facebook. I'm James Reid is my normal name, but JMD Reid, is my profile name, and I have a fan group called Fantastic Worlds of the Imagination. I'm also active in the sci-fi fantasy focus group, where I'm one of the mods, and so I can also be found there. I just did a takeover there for we had a Valentine's Day event on the day before Valentine's Day, and
Nice.
so
Yeah.
I posted some games. We discovered a really terrible romance novel generator,
Oh, okay.
title generator, and it came up with some really, really good, really bad, really awful, really strange ones.
Yeah, that sounds like so much fun. Do you have any new releases you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I just Diamond Stain, my sixth novel published, just got released as an audiobook at the end of last year. So yeah, that's out. And I got upcoming in March. We should have the first box set of Shadow of the Dragon. The first 6 out of the 12 books will be available in a box set. It's still TBD on exactly when we're releasing it, but it should be out in March, and that'll be that's my last series I just finished publishing last year, which was a marathon. We did 12 books
Right.
in 9 months.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
that is
3 book
quite.
a book every 3 weeks for 9 months. It was. I'm never doing that again.
Right. I don't I don't blame you at all. I may have to pick your brain and be like, how did you do this in the first place? Because this is a superhuman task. But congratulations, and
Yeah,
I'm glad you get some rest now. Hopefully.
yeah. Well, I'm back to writing a 7-book fantasy series, and I'm editing a 3-book fantasy series called What Darkness Hides that will be coming out sometime next year, and eventually we'll release Assassins of Illumination, which has been ready for publishing for 2 years, and I don't know, we just keep publishing other things in its place. It's
Right. The poor neglected book.
yeah,
But yeah, that's quite an accomplishment and so amazing. Thank you again so much for joining us
it
tonight.
was really great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you to our readers or listeners at home. Remember, there's more than one way up a mountain. And if you are interested in being a guest on our show, you can find us on social media at The Tell Not Show or email us at thetellnotshow@gmail.com. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, see you.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach and can be found at hijingsrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to 4, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks and see you next time.